Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with German-born, Brooklyn-based jazz saxophonist Tobias Meinhart. We talked to him in early February 2021 about his latest 2021 CD, The Painter. It is his sophomore album for Sunnyside Records with a new stellar band, and the saxophonist captures the mood of the current times. He was born in a small village in rural Bavaria and has spent the last 15 years carving out a career for himself on the international jazz scene. His career is on the up and up. Get to know him. Dig this interview.
Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I totally appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for doing an interview, yeah.
Yeah, you bet. So let's talk about your latest album, The Painter. It's coming out during a pandemic, a lot going on in the world. Talk to me a little bit about the timing of this project and just kind of how you feel about it in general.
Well, I think the overall picture I wanted to paint is just something hopeful, right? We have been like in a year with so much dread, everyone cannot stand it any longer, and I wanted to just kind of I wrote all the songs during the pandemic, but I wanted to kind of having a lifted, spirited, and putting out a hopeful message. That's in one word what I wanted to do.
Wonderful. Speaking of the pandemic and no live music, what do you miss the most about that live music environment that we haven't had since last March?
Oh man, going just to concerts, seeing my friends play, and of course playing music myself, but just being able to experience music live. I feel like as much as, sometimes I enjoy those streaming concerts, but it's definitely not the same. I think everyone realizes that it's so different to experience music with other people in the same room, and it's so much about vibration, right? It's all sound waves, and that's all getting lost with just sitting in front of a screen.
So talk to me about this lineup. This is your sophomore album. Talk to me about this lineup and how you feel about the conversation and how everybody came together musically for this project.
I've been playing with the main core quartet of those guys for the last 2 years, I would say. We were lucky to try out a lot of the music at the 55 bar and then played around town once or twice at Blue Note and Birdland. And it just felt so natural to play with them. Eden, the piano player, is my age, and we've been long friends. And he's just the best comping piano player I played with. It's like he knows everything I play in advance somehow, and I feel like in a cloud. And then the bassist and drums don't need any introduction, I guess. Like Matt Penman and Obed Carver, they are just such a unit because they play always together, and Matt doesn't live very far from me, and we got to know each other on some sessions and hanging. He also learned Spanish. We met like once a week to learn Spanish. My wife is Mexican, so we also opted to play tennis. So there's also some personal connection, and obviously whatever they play, it just makes everything sound. They make me sound better, so I just love that. And then Ingrid, I know that for the longest, Ingrid Jensen, she plays on 2-3 tunes. She's been a mentor. I know her for more than 15 years. She gave me her practice room. I babysat for a kid. We are good friends, and she helped me a lot in my beginnings in New York. And I wrote those tunes very specifically for her with her trumpet sound, and we toured in Europe, so the blending of tenor and trumpet is something I really like. And then Charles on guitar, also he's really literally a next door neighbor, and I just got to know him just for the physical closeness a little bit, and we started playing just the two of us also during the pandemic, where you couldn't really rehearse with a big band. We just played a lot of duos also.
So you have a very interesting past, your beginnings. Talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and how music and more specifically jazz became your life.
It's probably not the biggest jazz hub or center. I'm from a small village in Bavaria. The town I went to school is called Regensburg. Maybe one person people know not the current pope, but the pope before from that town. It's like 1.5 hours from Munich. And the beginnings came through my grandfather, who was a classical trained bassist. And then after the war, he started playing jazz because in Bavaria were all those American jazz clubs for the army, and they needed musicians. So he was lucky to learn jazz that way. I mean, he was a great classical bassist, but he learned jazz that way, and he played with a lot of stars who came through town, and they needed a local band. Like, I think he played with Ella and some big names. So really, the U.S. kind of exported jazz, especially to Bavaria, because that was one of the zones in Germany where the U.S. was stationed. And through him, so he played in big bands, and he took me to big band concerts, and I always was fascinated by the first row of the blinking saxophones. And I thought I wanna learn saxophone. So that's my first beginnings, and connection to jazz.
Wonderful. What were some of the musicians that you were influenced by?
My grandfather and my dad, they loved those early saxophone players, especially Ben Webster. I remember hearing a lot of Ben Webster and that deep sound with so much volume and still there's sweetness and beautiful sound. And Coleman Hawkins, those early guys I remember listening to a lot to as a kid. And now I'm coming back to it, funny enough. I still found it fascinating to hear Ben Webster's sound, how he got such a huge sound. I imagine it might also have to do because there were no real microphones or amplifiers at that time. I'm exploring that road, my beginning, so to say, a little bit more again. And then later it became Stan Getz, which is kind of the same road, and obviously then Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and more the 60s. But the early beginnings was Ben Webster for sure.
What was the first live jazz show you ever saw that really blew your doors down?
Probably there was one of the best German big bands also in my hometown. They had a concert with Clark Terry. There was the Summit Jazz Orchestra with Clark Terry. There's even a record of that band. And I got to meet him. I was probably like 13, 14. And just to talk to him, to Clark Terry, and his positive vibes, and it was amazing. So yeah, after that, I want to become a musician.
So what do you like the best about being a musician?
I mean, I love traveling. I got to meet a lot of people from, especially here in New York, to meet people from different countries, cultures, from Asia, from Russia, from all kinds of corners in the world, and we are connected through this universal language of music. In jazz, especially the standard culture, you don't even have to speak the same language. You immediately can play and make music together and connect. And then another thing, which is, I think, fairly unique to music, is that there are no borders between generations. You can really, I played with 80 years old, like with my grandfather, but later also with really older musicians who are so wide. And in sports, you cannot do that anymore. It's over after a certain time. But here you can play with a 15-year-old kid or some really grandmaster who is 90 years old, and that fascinates me still.
So you're in New York. You're the epicenter of jazz in the universe. What do you see as the resurgence and the resurrection of live music? How do you see that kind of happening this year?
Maybe I'm slightly naive, but I think it will happen in a big way. I imagine something like the golden 20s, 100 years ago, where everyone is starved now for live shows, live music, theater, movies. I think people are just really sick and tired to sit in front of their computers and watching Netflix. Even myself, I mean, it was such a saturation here in New York. I mean, of course, in the first year I was going to two shows a night, but then last year, after almost 10 years, sometimes I would say, "Oh, I'm tired. I can go see that band next week. I'm going home and watch a movie." And I definitely won't say that again. And I think a lot of people. So I think it will come back. Unfortunately, though, some clubs have closed. So other things will pop up. Maybe it's going to be more smaller venues, like pop-up venues, but that worries me a little bit. Who is going to be there after this is over?
So when we do come back, what do you hope we all realize about live music and the fact that we didn't have it for so long?
How it just connects people, and we are not going to take it for granted, hopefully, anymore. And people don't take the arts for granted now that it was not there for 1.5 years or something. I really hope there's going to be a new appreciation for the arts and for music.
Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're the one that's living your life. Who do you think you are?
Wow, that's such a good question. That's deep. I would say I'm a guy from Bavaria who now is in the United States where the music I love originated, and I'm giving my perspective of this music with my background, which might be something unique and interesting for people.
Wonderful. Hey man, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz today to talk about your life in music, the new album, the world. I appreciate it.
Wow, thank you. That was fast. So good questions. Awesome.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Germany, Brooklyn, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Tobias for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.